of love, right?
Indeed.
How? Okay, it's over 700 pages long.
That's correct.
How long did it take you to write?
This whole journey started 5 years ago, and thank you for giving me the outlet to talk about my work.
It's
started 5 years ago. The research and the writing, it took 5 years to accomplish.
Okay, and it was accomplished in under challenging circumstances as well. So I want to give you kudos for that and ask you, how did you decide this was what you were going to spend these last 5 years doing?
Well, what actually happened was that during the 2019 election, it suddenly dawned on me that there was underrepresentation of women in governance. There was underrepresentation of women in political participation and electoral politics. And so I got rather curious, and I began to think, well, is this related in any way to our constitution? You know, who really has sat down to draft Nigerian constitutions over the years? And so that curiosity took me to the archives at the University of Ibadan. And I told them, look, I'm doing some research into Nigeria's constitutions. Could I have some documents dating back to the colonial era? And they said, okay. But I also said, could I see some of the old newspapers? You know, maybe I would find some information there. I was referring to the West African Pilot and the Tribune, the papers that were around during the nationalist years. And they said, oh no, madam, we don't give those out. They're in such a bad state. We cannot let you have them. I said, okay. So on this particular day, I started looking for the documents that would tell me, who and who were at the constitutional conferences and all of that. But while waiting quietly, I noticed across the table a stack of old newspapers or West Africa Pilot. And I thought, wow, I had asked for them and they said, you don't give them out. Where they are across the table, I can have a look at them and believe.
Indeed.
They are in the bad state, but I can still look at them because they're lying their eyes and probably waiting for me. So I went to look at the papers and I began to flip through gently because they were really in a bad state. And then when I got to the month of May, on the front page, the headline was something like Lagos women revolt against old Africa. And I was like, wow, in 1944, women were revolting against old Africa. In 2019, I believe we're still doing the same. What's this about? So I read the story and it said, continued on page 4. But when I got to page 4, it was a big hole because it had, like I said, the papers were in such a bad state. But the long and short of it is that the story was saying that on that very day, or the previous day, rather, 10th of May, a group of women got together and formed a political party. And I was like, I'm a student of history. I did history from primary school, O level, A level. Indeed, I did history. Yeah, you must have records.
Is it Osama? We've frozen. I don't know if it's us or you. I think she's back. Okay, you're back.
So that made me I took on a different direction. I decided that I was going to, find out more about what women had done during the nationalist years. And I wasn't going to, bother about Nigeria's constitution any longer.
Okay.
So I changed directions, and so I went around the country, from Ibadan. I went to Kaduna, I went to Enugu, I went to Aduke, where I have a home, and I also went to Lagos. I went to all the archives in those places, and I found so much information, just so much.
Okay. So before
so that's the beginning of the journey.
So before I go back to your book, are our archives in a bad state? Are they in a good state? You say you found a lot. Are they looked after? Because I think that is part of our challenge, isn't it? That apart from the fact that our history archives are not accessible, they're not looked after well.
Yes, that is part of the problem. A lot of the newspapers and the documents are revised because our archives are paper-based. But I do believe that there is some plan to digitize, some of the archives around the country because we have several branches. We have decentralized.
Yeah.
Apart from the branches in Kaduna and everything, they have smaller branches in some of the state capitals around the country. But they are in need of some intervention, maybe from the private sector, because I don't know what government can really accomplish at this point. But perhaps if there's some investment from the partnership, partnering with the archives, from coming in from the private sector, then we can address the state of the archives. Because in truth, history is being lost. Like I said, I got to page 4 of a particular newspaper, and it was a big hole. There was no information there. So some material has been lost, and a lot of material is being lost. You have to really turn the pages very carefully, otherwise they may reduce to, powder right before your very eyes.
But let's go back to Broad Street, 1944. The National Women's Party is formed by Lady Abayomi. And what they were interested in, education, employment, economy, and adult female suffrage. What struck me is that things haven't changed that much, have they? It's the same things.
It's the same thing that Onikan House complained about that we're talking today. I will quote one of her statements because it's like, if I know it by memory.
Please.
She said, the interests of women are being sorely neglected. That is what she said at the press conference that day in 1944. And indeed, that is still the case today. She also said, look, our men folk do not help us. They are only interested in their own selfish interests.
Yes. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. We didn't hear it properly at the back. We didn't hear it properly. What interests are they interested in? We didn't hear anything. Their own, because I took down the quote. Hence the formation of this party should not only champion women, but also reduce the extreme selfish motive of men folk. It hasn't changed, it hasn't. Now, something that struck me about this book, I'm going to jump up and down a bit, was you focus a lot on the legal profession. There's like a whole chapter from Stella Thomas Mark all the way down to Justice Judge Sola Agunbiade and all of them. And but what struck me when I was reading it, because I'm a lawyer, was that when we were growing up, we didn't see them as doing anything special. They were people's aunties, people's mothers. But it was when I was reading your book that I realized, really, considering that British West African education at the time they were being educated was focused on domestic science. What they achieved was incredible, wasn't it?
Indeed it was. Indeed it was. And if you remember, I devoted chapter 2 also to the fact that girls' education at that time was devoted to the domestic science. And the Governor General was quoted as saying, look, girls' education will end in marriage. So we're training them for marriage.
Yeah.
And so, and those ladies in those years it's very important. And I thought we should record it. Because not only did they train as barristers, several of them went to do wonderful things. There was so much college, some became activists, they became newspapers. fought for women's rights. And I don't think that any of this is written anywhere, or maybe it's just scattered all over the place. So I have sort of brought it together, and I have given these women due, as I believe they should have a place in history. Coupled with the fact that a lot of information about Stella Thomas is inaccurate. You know, if you go online, the things that have been written about her are inaccurate, and people have not bothered to verify what they have read about her. So I went back to her institutions, the institution that she attended, and I actually found out that she didn't even attend the University of Oxford, as it is said online, and people just run with it. She didn't attend Oxford. Oxford don't even have, they said they have no record of her. What happened was that in 1929, she went to Portway College, Girls' College in Reading. And from there she did so well, and then straight to the Middle Temple. So the Middle Temple gave me her documents, her handwritten forms, and she filled herself, saying her name, her age, where she lived, who her father was. So they handed those documents to me. So I have the authentic report, yes, the school reports of. So I deliberately put them in the book so people will see that this is really who Stella Thomas was, and these are the schools that she attended.
And back to the female education in Nigeria. The education for boys at that time, and we're talking like the 1930s, 1940s, it promoted administration and technical vocational skills for boys. For girls, household arts and home management. And while you think, okay, yeah, what's the harm in that? The point is that when it now gets to work, they're not qualified for work, are they? And in 1922, Miss Ekong in Calabar tried to apply to get a job in the civil service. Have you frozen? And so you couldn't get a job in the civil service. In fact, it was a big deal, wasn't it? In 1922, Miss Ekong applied, and it was oh my God, what are we going to do with them?
Yes, it was the chapter on the letter of the application letter. Miss Ekang's letter produced the whole correspondence as to why women employed in the civil service were referred to as African ladies. So memos went around between the various colonial governors in British West Africa asking the question, what do we do? Should we employ African ladies in the civil service? And when they were employed, they were not on the same pay scale. Or there was a concern that we cannot keep men and women in the same room. There was the worry that they would get married and then they would go up and have children. So
and illicit things was the word that was used.
As the question itself, pardon?
I said illicit things was the phrase that the governor used. They didn't want illicit occurrences between men and women in the same office.
Yes. 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 They also said things that we don't want. They also said things that we don't want men. We don't want women to supervise men.
Our internet is giving us spotty, and I'm not sure why. Okay, so one of the things, is she back? Okay. Well, yes? No. Okay, you're back. Oh, we are back. We should. I'm so sorry. It's not usually like this. I'm so sorry. Okay, and one of the things that I think your book does is it makes you think, okay, and makes you wonder. For instance, Sylvia Lee Ross, okay, was a lady who was married to Captain Ross, came here in 1907 to Zundalu. The husband died. She was the sister to Governor Roxton. And over a period of, from till like 1960, she kept coming back to Nigeria every 10 years. She was involved in the setting up of Queen's College. After the Aba Women's War, she went to Onikan and interviewed people. And I had really liked Sylvia Leith Ross until I read in your book that she doesn't believe that Nigerian women should be career women. But she spent her life working, coming here, setting up Queen's College, writing a book on Fulani translation. Why would she feel that we can't work?
I think that Sylvia Leith Ross was, I don't use the word victim, but she was, speaking to her situation at the time. They lived in a world whereby women, there was a demarcation between the public sphere and the private sphere. And so she grew up with that Victorian ideology. And she was sent over to Nigeria as a civil servant in the education department. So she was, and I believe I said in the book, she was coming from that sort of upbringing and that sort of thinking, So while she was a career woman herself, they didn't think that, and that was colonial policy. She could not pass, I would disagree with the colonial policy at the time. And so she also complained that, look, she couldn't find any of her male compatriots that were interested in setting up girls' schools in the north. It was one of the complaints that she, and it's in black and white, she actually wrote a report about that. So for her to go down south, to start, talking about how the women in the eastern provinces should be prepared for domestic trade and so on, it's part of the colonial policy system that she found herself in. So that was what was going on at the time, and it was so deeply ingrained that domestic science centers were being set up, even at Queen's College. While they had some of the subjects that would help a woman, a young lady, get onto the career pathway in terms of maybe an administrative job. But by and large, Queen's College in the early days also became a domestic science center, for young ladies. And domestic science centers were set up from north to south. Every nook and corner had, and it was the pride and joy of the education department, to have a domestic science. Land was being sought for. They would look for land.
To have a domestic science.
Yes, they were bringing in teachers from different parts of the world, British women, to come and teach domestic science here. Indeed, when Queen's College was set up, the principal of the school actually said, look, we have been going around the British Isle chasing somebody, one person or the other, to become a domestic science teacher in Nigeria at Queen's College.
It's actually, and to set that, again, for the women who became doctors and lawyers, I think it sets it in context how much they achieved to have overcome that kind of background. Let's take the opportunity to stab our favorite Lord guard at the back, who says girls were only trained in laundry work. This is not even domestic science at this rate. This is manual labor. What? And you have to wonder how the thinking and how women were able to make that leap. And I think that it was helped a lot, and it's something that your book emphasizes, the amount of resistance to male dominance, patriarchy, oppression. Okay, clap for the person who said oppression, yes.
It was Emmanuel.
It wasn't Emmanuel, but we can still clap for him. We can still clap for him. So I did a short list, okay? And these are all rebellions from your book. You will tell us about them. 1909 in Lagos, the water rates. 1925, Calabar women's protests. So I'm going to do Bulu. Okay, so 1909, water rates in Lagos. 1925, Calabar women's protests. 1929, Aba women's war. 1931, Ijebu tax. 1948, Ijebu tax. 1940, Pelua's petition to the governor. 1940, Igala, Keba province. 1946, 47, Abeokuta. 1954, Abakaliki. 1955, Ibadan. 1957, Jos. 1947, Onitsha. 1949, the process after the Iba Valley. 1950, Calabar oil mill. 1943, Efurun Warri. 1950, Sabongari in Kano. 1958, Owerri. We are so sorry, but what are the words? Somebody's, yeah, okay. What they say, break in transmission, I'm so sorry. So we're back, and the person, I had noticed before that there was a message in the chat. Can the person who sent it resend it, because in the changing over, it's gone. So we were talking about the amount of resistance, and we read out a list. I'm not sure if you heard me reading out the list. What do you think pushed women to make these protests? Why weren't they content with their domestic science education?
I think that some of the women at that time were privileged to study in the United Kingdom, and they returned home with various ideas and suggestions for how we can move the country forward. After all, women in Britain had received the vote by 1928. So a lot of interaction with women from other countries, and a lot of the progress that was going on elsewhere obviously filtered into Nigeria. We had the likes, again, I would say Stella Jane Mark, who came back to return to Nigeria sometime in 1935 or so. And we had several other women who had studied abroad and returned, the wives of some of the daughters of some of the wealthy men. So they returned home with these ideas, and of course, they would say, look, Nigerian women can do much better than we're doing now. And of course, there was also the oppression. I think somebody in your audience mentioned the word oppression. There was the oppression from the colonial administrators. And, it was felt that, look, it's time to throw off the yoke of taxation. It's time for us to fight for women's suffrage, for example. So that served as a driving force for women to say enough is enough. We need to have, certain policies in place, certain programs in place that would help us. We want to have as the basis for girls' education, for example, and that was one of the things that the women's National Women's Party was fighting for, that we want to have much more than domestic science as the girls' education. So of course, the resistance went around, and it was not just the middle class women. We had the women in the rural areas as well, who were saying enough of the market tolls, enough of the relocation, short notice relocation of our markets, enough of the poor treatment that is being meted out to us. And of course, we had women in Warri, market women in Warri were saying, look, we've had enough. They would storm the office of the colonial officer and say, you have behaved in such a poor, poor approach to our grievances and all of that. So you will find that, especially in southern Nigeria, there's a lot of, and in the middle belt, of course, there was a lot of resistance to colonial policies that women felt were not in their best interests.
I thought while we are speaking about colonial policies, I thought it was interesting that when it came to the issue in Lagos of women being elected to the Legislative Council, that it was Nigerian men who weren't keen on this in 1941, when Alakija and Thomas went to the governor to say, oh no, we don't think women. That was the. Shall we talk about that a bit? And it's Women's History Month. We can be as we can take our liberties. Yes, because I was actually quite shocked because I thought Nigerian women are being oppressed by the colonials, and then our own men are saying, no, you continue with the domestic science. That's what we like.
Yes, indeed. When I got hold of slips of some of these meetings, and I saw it there that two of them, and one other, went to the colonial government and said, look, the women are well placed to Thomas, yes, HSA Thomas. Women are well placed to pay. Of course, he said that indoors, but I don't think that was published in the newspaper. So I thought I might as well put that in, that this is what they are saying behind your backs. And Alakija was the owner of the Nigerian Daily Times. It didn't appear in the newspapers, that part of it. But the issue relating to Pelewura and the call for end of taxation of women and all of that was highly publicized in the West African pilot, because they had the support. It was seen as a nationalist issue.
Yes.
And the women had the support of the West Africa pilot. Of course, the Daily Times, owned by Alakija, reported on it, but there was no information about his true thoughts about women having to pay taxes in Lagos at the time.
And it was interesting to me because the elite class, the middle class women wouldn't be working. So presumably they wouldn't have an income. So therefore they wouldn't be taxed. So it's the market women who would be taxed. Why would Alakija not see that it would be a problem? It's odd. Or did they feel that, well, it wouldn't affect their women anyway because they're at home doing domestic science?
Well, the truth of the matter is that there were certain elites that were in sync with the colonial government. Kitoye Ajasa, for instance, Onikan's father. If you read chapter 1, you will see that I said, I don't know how Kitoye Ajasa would have felt if he saw that his daughter was now railing against the colonial administration, because he was in one with them. He was in unity with them, and he was the first Nigerian to be given a knighthood.
Absolutely.
So the likes of him, the likes of Eric Moore, the likes of Alakija, they were all in alignment with the colonial government. I'm not saying that they were. Sorry?
Henry Carr.
I'm not saying that they were, Henry Carr, they were all parts of the colonial system, and they all were appointed to one position or the other. Ajasa was a member of the Legislative Council, so too was Eric Moore. Alakija also. They all had one thing or the other to do with the government. So they were not really, from the perspective of women, really in favor so much for women's rights, women's freedoms, And I also should also say, because that will really lead us to women's suffrage, that some of the newspapers will say, look, it's time for women to vote, give women their rights. The Daily Service of 1949 published a whole editorial saying women's franchise. We want our women to be able to vote. But it was for their own self-interest. It wasn't that they wanted women to compete against the men or women to, become candidates in the elections. What they were after is that women should vote for
Like the
men. That
husband.
was why they were agitating for
That's right.
women's franchise.
Yes, yes, and it was interesting as well, because that dichotomy between the suffrage in the South and the suffrage in the North. By the time there was suffrage for the women in the South, the women in the North weren't entitled to vote till 1976, and that's within the lifetime of almost everybody in this room. And you think to yourself, when you read in your book the thought processes behind it and the reasons, and you can understand why Haja Sawaba will say in frustration, one day the harems will be open and the women will come out. I mean, I think that when you talk about your book, it's not just the South. What is important is that you also gave a balanced view with the women, with the situation with the women in the North too. Want to talk about that?
I didn't quite hear you clearly, but if you are talking about the women, the Northern women's journey towards enfranchisement,
Yes.
it was totally different to that of women in the South, and it took much longer. As we know, they eventually were allowed to vote in 1976, but it was a long and arduous journey because, and we had the likes of Gambo, Sawaba, and Ladi Shehu, and Elizabeth Evase, who are the ones at the forefront of trying to get women to vote up. They came against a very active Sir Ahmadu Bello, because he was against women voting, and he kept promising, and they would put it off, and they'd promise again, and he was interviewed by the newspapers. There was once he went to Switzerland, and on his way back, he was actually interviewed about, are you going to grant women in the North their franchise? And he said, what is all the fuss? He said, after all, women in Switzerland do not vote. Those were his words that I saw in the newspapers, and I slotted it into the book.
Yes.
So there was a lot of resistance, and the likes of Gambo Sawaba and other women were thrown into jail because they attended political rallies. They were labeled as prostitutes. There were anti-prostitute raids, or political rallies. Women were not allowed to go to political rallies, and if they were found there, they were labeled as prostitutes, charged for that, and put in prison, or charged for drunkenness and put in prison. So they went through all of that, and it was quite different to what the Southern women faced. But Southern women also supported Northern women's vote, because we had the likes of Olaya Ransom Kuti, we had women in the NCNC, the likes of Margaret Epo speaking out and saying, it's time for women in the North to vote. Let our sisters up north be allowed to vote and be voted for. So it was such a very long and complex journey before under the regime of the military regime of Obasanjo, that women in the North were given the vote through the local government elections that took place in 1976.
Yes. What when you mentioned Fulani Ransom Kuti, a vignette that I thought was very interesting was Elizabeth Ivase, how she said that she had been inspired because she'd been taken to a rally when she was a child, and she had seen Ransom Kuti speaking, and then Malama Shehu had said that when they used to live in Abeokuta, they lived next door to Mrs. Ransom Kuti. And I thought it was very interesting how almost it's like the puzzles of a quilt, and how a spark is lit in one place and you don't know where it's going to end up. Did you hear me? I'm frozen.
No, what was the question?
Okay, no. I said that I thought it was a touching vignette how Malama Shehu had said that she'd been inspired by Funayama Sokuti when from living next door to her as a child, and how I think it was Elizabeth Ivase, how she'd been inspired by having been taken to her child as a child to watch Herbert Macaulay and FRK and at a political rally. And I thought it was interesting how those experiences as young women had formed them into activists at a later age.
Yes, indeed, you're right there. A lot of women, the courage and activism of FRK, Fulayo Kuti.
I'm so sorry, people.
They were trying to raise funds in order to go to Britain to talk about the 1946 Constitution. So yes, Florence Okuti's influence and her progressive thinking certainly affected positively a lot of women in Nigeria. And I discovered that I discovered the transcripts of the council meetings that took place in between 1946 and 1948. And I thought, well, I don't know, I don't think these conversations are in the public space. So might as well just, reproduce them so that people understand what really happened, what took place, what was being said at the time that the 1948 tax protest took place. But of course, it wasn't just Funaya Ransokuti. She was an inspiration to a lot of people, and even women in Abeokuta. There are several other women in the Abeokuta urban, in the township, who also were inspired by her and joined the women's union and served as secretary, vice president, treasurer, and all of that. To help the movement achieve what it's achieved.
And when you speak about inspiration, I think one thing about your book as well is how it takes the definition of how it expands the definition of Nigerian women. Because you talk about the contributions of people like Justice Ogunteye, Mrs. Ajose, Mrs. Igodaru. And I think that the fact that you're inclusive with the fact that women who have married into and they have become Nigerians are also included in your book. You want to talk about that?
Oh yes. Perhaps you're referring to Irene Wesley. Irene Wesley was actually born married in Nigeria, but she was a woman because she started, she was interested in women's progress right from when she was a student in England. And she was a member of the WASU. WASU is the West Africa Students Union. She was well known in the circles. Herself and her brother, actually, they were well known in the circles, in the nationalist circles. And she was the only woman who presented a paper in 1942 at a Pan-Am conference where she spoke about the social issues affecting Nigeria, affecting women in West Africa, affecting children. She spoke about education. She spoke about employment. She didn't understand why a well-qualified nurse should not be at par with an European nurse back in the colonies. So she spoke about such issues, but not much is known about her. She eventually married Mr. Igodaru, who became a minister under the Obafemi Awolowo government in the Western region.
Yeah.
But I felt that someone like her should be part of my book. She had there was an experience that she had whereby being probably the only Black woman at the university then, I think we're in Newcastle as a medical student, she was actually summoned to the office of the vice chancellor to say, stop your activities. stop your nationalist activities, focus on your schoolwork, on your medical studies. But it obviously went in one ear and came out the other because she continued.
Yes.
And I was fortunate enough to meet her daughter, Professor Morogwe, who gave me a copy of her book.
Yeah.
So I read her story and I thought, plus what I had seen in the WASU records, because her name is in the WASU records. She's present in the photographs that were taken at the conferences that were held. I thought, she deserves to have a mention in the book as well.
Yes, and Justice Ogunde Dulcie.
Oh, yes, Justice Ethel.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
She also, yes, I mentioned her because she was married to a Nigerian. I believe she gave up her British citizenship to become a
A
Nigerian
judge.
citizen,
Yeah.
and she was one of the first 5 judges. I think I did the first 5 judges, and she was one of the first 5 judges during the crisis in Western Nigeria. She was the magistrate that attended to some of the causing disturbances during the outbreak of the Operation Wete. Then, I think in Akure. So I thought, oh, let me include her as well in what we are saying, because she contributed to the growth, the progress of Nigeria's judiciary. Unfortunately, I couldn't use a photograph of her because I was not able to get the family to give me her photograph.
Okay.
But
Well,
nonetheless, her story is there as one of the first 5 judges in Nigeria, female judges in Nigeria.
what I'm going to do, because of the internet, I'm going to ask if there's questions so that we can, and then I will come back to you. We have one question online. I don't know if you can see it. I'll put it up now. Okay, back to the domestic centers. Did the domestic centers have any impact on homes in Nigeria of those days as compared to homes in 2024? As a brave soul. Over to you, Tayo. Did the domestic... It was Women's Day on Friday. Go on. So
I would say that I would use myself as an example, because when I was in primary school, every Thursday we had to go for the domestic science lesson, where we were taught laundry, we were taught how to make soap jelly, we were taught how to clean the house. This was in primary school back in the 60s. So, and you are given those skills for looking after the house. So it doesn't mean that because I have those skills to look after the house and to help my home, doesn't that mean that I don't have my ambition to pursue a professional career? And I believe that is the same of a lot of girls of my generation. Yes, we went for these domestic science classes, while the boys in our class went for woodwork and carpentry and all of that. But it has helped us, I would say, because a lot of us in my generation, we have grown up to become what we are today. And we have those skills which we have passed on to our sons, not just our daughters, our sons and our daughters. So my so my answer to that question is yes, we did. We were opened, we experienced the domestic science lessons and classes throughout primary school, and it has made us better, better off better citizens. It's made us better citizens, but it has not taken us away from our professional vision for ourselves. So while we're in the domestic science class, we also know that yes, when I'm going to do my A levels, I'm going to become a doctor, I want to become a nurse, and or whatever it is, or a lawyer, but we still ingrain those domestic science skills into our sons. My son, for instance, he does what his sisters do. He doesn't. I taught him how to cook. And he loves cooking because I've taught him how to cook, cleaning, and all of that. They are he's well grounded in that. So our sons also should, imbibe those domestic science skills. what what a woman can do, a man can do sort of thinking.
Okay, do we have any, okay, can I ask you to come to the front so that Taya can see you? We have a, yeah. Yes, please. You have to come so that you can see you.
Yes, thank you so much. First, my name is Tola Agunbiade. I'm also a lawyer, and it was very, very interesting to hear the history of women who have contributed to Nigeria to the development of women's suffrage in Nigeria. But a lot of the history, like history, is in the past. I believe the purpose of history is to guide us in the present. And so my question is, first,
can you hear him?
Can you hear me?
Well, not too clearly, not very clearly.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes.
Oh, yes, so
Yes.
I said that, look, I'm happy to have listened to you. I'm happy to have heard the history of women who have helped Nigeria, who have helped women's suffrage. And like you said, most of this history is not in the public domain. So I'm happy to hear to have heard this. But I also said, my question is that history should guide us in the present. And some of the things you said, my question first is, for instance, the women's part from your research and how you wrote the book, is there any sign that it still affected or it helps women now to, is the party even still alive? Or is there anything about the party alive? That's fun. Now, so
they can't hear you. Maybe use the mic.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me now?
Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
without the mic.
Yeah, so what I was saying was that, yes, history is critical for us, it's important, but it's important to the extent that it helps us now. And so I wanted to speak to the party, the Nigerian Women's Party, or at the time in the 40s, in the 50s, 60s. How has that helped women in participating in politics now? Is the party still around? Is there any way that has helped the kids and the children and the women who come after them? So that's one. The second question for me, which is also related, is about now. A lot of things you've said were tied to the colonial times, which obviously in the 40s and the 60s was just shortly after, even in England, women's suffrage was agreed to. But this is 2024. Women, especially in the southern Nigeria, have been voting for a long time. Women are for intents and purposes, officially can vie for any position. Now, what has the women now, with education, with their daughters, what have they done in terms of that is similar to what the women of those days are doing? Is there any such, are there such women now? And what is it that allowed women then be who they were to fight for this right? And are the women now also in the same realm or the same position to fight as aggressively publicly for those rights?
Thank you very much. Tayo, did you get that? Do you want to answer each question, or shall we do them 2 or 3 together?
Let me answer these two. They're quite heavy. They're very heavy duty. So the first one is that how did the Nigerian Women's Party, how has that impacted on women of today? I think I heard.
Yeah.
I would say that the legacy of the Nigerian Women's Party has been to show women that we can evolve into politics, into electoral politics. And as we have seen, through the years, women have been doing that, though we need to do more. Because when you look back, and that's part of the reason why I have written this book, is that I wanted to trace the history of women's electoral participation and to say, we have done it, it has been done in the past, but it's a gradual build up to being better than it was in the past. So not a lot of women know about, what Onikan did and the Nigerian Women's Party. But when you look at it now, it's also supposed to put fire in our bellies and say, oh, this was done before. So we can do it now. We can persevere and we can push, just as the women in the olden days, so to speak, in the 40s, this is what they did. They tried to break through the patriarchal barriers and say, look, we're going to forge ahead. We're going to have a voice. We're going to be part of the legislative institutions. We're going to be part of public decision making and to be part of the building of our country and have a voice in what is being said. Of course, we know there have been setbacks along the way, but it helps for us to understand that we have a history of being involved in the public space, albeit in very minute ways, in very minimal ways. But the history is there for us to look back onto. So I think that what women are doing today, because we still have women who participate in electoral politics, but we're still not there. As a matter of fact, I did a journey from the 20s of women being in the public space right up to 2022. And we know that in the Fourth Republic, if I was just to take the Fourth Republic, which started in 1999, there has been a nosedive of the number of women in our national assemblies, in our national assembly and state houses of us. So we still need to do more. We know that the gender bills that were thrown out back on Women's Day 2022 or so, I believe that women are now rallying together again and say we are pushing for these bills to be passed in the 10th National Assembly. So all of these things are kind of linked, women's working out, women being in politics, women being, women sitting in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. They're all sort of linked together, but we can look back to say, yes, we do have a history of this. What we need to do is to forge ahead. For the second question, can women fight aggressively today? I believe so. It's all part of what I have just said. Women fought for the vote. Women were writing articles. Women were submitting memoranda, and they were not keeping quiet, to get the vote. And eventually, we did get the right to vote, both Northern women and Southern women. So this fight continues, because we're not where we want to be. And again, I've just spoken about those 5 gender bills that were thrown out on Women's Day 2022. Women went to court. We know there's a court case, and the judge, Justice Donatus, sitting at the Abuja High Court, ruled in favor of women. Whether the government will now implement what he has said, the 35% affirmative action, remains to be seen. But it shows you that women are not staying quiet. We're not sitting down and just thinking that it will happen. And of course, throughout the sub-region, Senegal, Mali, Mauritania, they all have one form of gender affirmative action or the other. And so it's not as if to say we are just, fighting for something that is not attainable. It is attainable, so women are fighting aggressively today for what they want, because there is nobody else to do it. What we actually also need is more male champions. Back in the 50s, we had the likes of Mazi Mbono Jike. I don't know how many people know that. Mazi Mbono Jike stood up at the 1950 General Conference in Ibadan and said women should vote. Unfortunately, he lost the vote because there were 53 men there. Mazi Mbono and Professor Eyo Ita wrote a minority report as a result of that experience, so that we know that in history we have male gender champions. Yeah. So our men should, when they see that, when they learn about what Mbono Jike and Professor Eyo Ita did in the 50s, they won't feel maybe shy or reluctant to speak out about women's rights, and women's improvement, women being having their rights enshrined properly, because it's not well grounded in the Constitution yet. It's like saying one thing on one side, but taking it away in another breath. That is what we have at the moment. So I hope that answers the gentleman's question.
Okay. And so let's go to people online. So Barnaby Phillips, congratulate you on an epic piece of research. Can you tell us about the written archives for Northern Nigeria? How easy are they to use?
They are easy to use. They are easy to use. You have once you go there, you just register and say what you want. Our archives are accessible. They are open to the public. You go there, you register, say what you want, and they would, you fill a form, and they go into the shelves, into the repositories, I think they're called, and bring out what it is that you want. So if they are accessible around the country, because the archives are accessible.
People are asking, how can the book be purchased? I believe there's a link. We can send that link out on your behalf, if you like, to the people who have emailed.
Yes, certainly, please do.
Okay.
So it's not yet in Nigeria. It was published in the UK. And this should bring me to the point that I couldn't get a publisher in Nigeria. When I started off, I was so excited that, oh, these are stories about women. So I thought, oh yes, I would get a publisher. But lo and behold, none of the publishers in Nigeria were interested. And it became such an emotional point for me that when I talk about it, my voice trembles. I couldn't believe that I would not get a publisher in Nigeria to get to speak about, to publish women's history. There was no excitement. And so luckily I got a publisher in the UK, in Newcastle, and they said, hand us the rights. So I have given them the rights because nobody else wanted the rights. They have the rights to the book. So, maybe some publisher in Nigeria will now say, oh, they see the value in what we are talking about, the importance of having women's stories out there, the importance of having a balanced historiography and not having a one-sided story about a country. And then they would say, they want to now link up with my publisher in the UK and publish the book so that everyone in Nigeria could have a copy. It should be in the schools, it should be in the schools, it should be in a higher institution. It's a reference book. It's over 700 pages. It has tables, photographs, newspaper cuttings. So it is a reference book, and I think that Nigerians deserve to read this book. And it can serve as, for PhD students, it can serve as a reference. You can now zero in and do deeper research on some of the topics that are in the book.
There's a comment from
Hello.
Can you hear me? Are you there? Yeah. So there's a comment from Dr.
Yes, I can. Yes.
Dr. Anino Emwa. This is fascinating. She thanks you, and she says her mom is one of the trailblazing women in the book, and she's on this call. What a Mother's Day gift to her and our family. Please say. Please send her.
Yes.
And please send her our regards and happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Okay. Now let's go back to physical. Yes, a question? Yes, you have to come up. While he makes his way up, okay. Yeah.
So, my name is Ayo Ademili. I'm a lawyer and I'm a socialist feminist. I want to salute your scholarly energy in producing this book. I think it's also important to situate, just as the earlier inquirer also asked, between the history and the contemporary. We saw during the answers, which some of us were direct participants, feminist energy beyond also the question of police brutality. In fact, there's a feminist coalition that also played a very important role in that exchange. So in contemporary times too, particularly for the Gen Z millennials, we are seeing, well, hope you are hearing me. Hope you can hear me, sir. Ma.
I can.
For the Gen Z millennials, how do we now connect this history to the fact that there are recent agitation for feminist rights against patriarchal domination can equally be is linked to a very deep history. The history of people like Kumlayo Rason Kuti, Adia Sawaba, who are left-wing elements in their own right. Then number two is on the question of uh, uh, the male voices. I think we need to also examine, I would want to know your attitude to the question of class in terms of demanding for feminists, for women rights. Of course, we have male voices. For those male voices, we also be the voices of the ruling class. So we saw, for instance, the position of Funmilayo Ransome-Kuti, and then involvement in organizing women's union in Abeokuta and the rest of it. So how do we situate the question of class, given your historical investigation in this agitation for women's rights? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the last question first. I would say that my research showed that the fight for women's rights cuts across classes for women. The market women, as we know, were not Western educated. Still, they knew what was right and what was wrong. They had a sense of justice. As a matter of fact, the slogan, no taxation without representation, started from Kailawura. And it was then picked up by the Women's Union in Abeokuta province. That is what my research has shown me. So the fight for women's rights, it cuts across classes, and unfortunately, we lived and we still live in a very patriarchal society. So, but women still know what they wanted. And they also, whether they were the petty traders, the market women, they were earning their own money. So they had some financial independence. And so that in itself enabled them to start talking about these issues, regardless of, the patriarchal setup in their communities. I would also add to that what the gentleman said, that unfortunately, I've seen that since we had the not too young to run, what we now see is that the male youth are gradually taking over the old male guard. So we still have a long way to go on the issue of patriarchy and the male voice. There's a lot of resistance from our men to enter into politics, subtly and covertly. There's that resistance, and that is why we find today that the not too young to run has not even helped the young female politician. To go to the NSAS matter, I think that they have written their history. They have written their history. Some fine day, somebody is going to write about them. I didn't include them because it's still very fresh and very contemporary. So I didn't even include them. But I believe that they have written their history, and some fine day, books are going to be written about what they did and what they achieved at that time. At that time, what drove them, the motivation, and I'm sure they also looked back on their foremothers and said, well, our mothers did this in the past. After all, our mothers said, look, they threw off the yoke of taxation. When Pelewura said they don't want to pay the tax in Lagos at the time, some amendment was made. So they made some gains. They got some gains. The same thing in Abeokuta. The same thing in the eastern provinces. The Aba Women's War, and prior to the Aba Women's War in 1925, women in Calabar also said, look, we've had enough of these market tolls and these market fees. Our chiefs are not involved. They don't know what is business. So some changes were made. And that is what we are after, to have some changes where women will have a voice. After the Abba Women's Right, as a matter of fact, I was privy to have to read the proceedings of the Abba Women's War. And one lady got up, the one lady got up and said, look, it's about time we have we should be allowed to vote. There should be voting. There should be changing of those warrant chiefs. Women should also have a voice in what is being said in the community. And the Daily Times described her as an Igbo suffragette. Her name was Ahudi. We were not given the surname, but the Daily Times described her as an Igbo suffragette. So there are all those examples that I'm sure our young ladies, our young feminists have looked at and are aware of or partially aware of, that it's also driving their own views of and what they want to say. Enough of the brutality. Women in the 40s were saying enough of the brutality. The Women's Union took the colonial DPO to court. The newspaper cutting of 1948 shows that they took them to court because of brutality. So the NSAS women, ladies, are also doing a similar thing. And they have written their history, and that will be documented, I'm sure, at some point in the future.
Thank you. I'd like to go online. Aisha Remy is drawing our attention to that Ahmadu Bello was a big he for she. He encouraged Northern women to get an education and to work, and he also told their husbands to let them work. Aisha Oshori is online and she would like to make some comments. If you are still on, Aisha, I will unmute you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you unmuted? Is that you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm fine. Can you hear me?
Yes. For those who don't know, Aisha ran and wrote a book about her experiences. So I think she's coming in at a good point. Please, over to you. Oh, we've lost you.
So thank you. I mean, to be honest, I just wanted to say thank you to can you still hear me? I just want to say thank you to Ms. Agunbiade for writing this book. I think it's very important. I think history is really, really lacking in Nigeria. And I'm sorry to hear about her experiences with trying to get a publisher in Nigeria. But the truth is, we are still struggling with a very poor reading and publishing culture. But I hope you'll not be discouraged. I think my comment really was to say we should do, everybody who's here, who has contacts and who has the influence, to make sure that maybe at least some schools pick up this book as part of their curriculum. It's a bit disheartening that even in the late 70s, we're still learning things like Mungo Park discovered the River Niger inside our curriculum. And it's really scary to think what we're still learning. I was struck by the fact that maybe 60, 70, 80 years ago, the British were telling us that women didn't need to work. And then now DFID or UK Aid, as they've rebranded themselves, are spending millions trying to increase women's political participation. So I don't know if they see the irony there. That's so just on the book. Well done. And let's try and get it out there as much as possible. And second comment was really, yes, about the political sphere. The book that I wrote was Love Doesn't Win Elections. And I just wanted to point out that it's hard to talk about women's mobilizing today. And yes, we are not sleeping. People are engaging with the National Assembly. We're trying to change the laws. But the truth is there's something about our entire political ethos and structure that's beyond women alone trying to get in. It's also beyond good men trying to get in. So I think we have structural issues. And so sometimes I can't help feeling lately that the emphasis is on women trying to get into a system that's broken. Is that what we should be spending our energy on, or should we be working more collectively and collaboratively to change or to reform that structure that's actually, broken, instead of trying to take part in it? So just some things to complicate the conversation even more. Not that Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Thank you. We are back to physical. Any comments? Yes, please, at the back, please come forward.
Good afternoon, or good evening, ma'am. My name is Osose Aziba. I'm a lawyer, and thank you very much for this amazing piece of work. I just saw it randomly online yesterday, and I said that I had to be here to be able to, I thought I would be able to get a copy of the book. I was really, really looking forward to it. As a millennial, the closest I had to history was, well, my dad likes history, so he always used to speak to us about it, and I just took a kind of fondness to it. But it wasn't something that was like compulsory in school or anything. And so the closest that I had to studying history was government as a subject. Even as an art student, history wasn't compulsory at the time. So before I ask my question, I would really also like to lend my voice to what the last speaker had said and appeal to you to please not be discouraged. There's still, especially for us, the generation that have come after, is so heartbreaking. When I sat at the back and you made that comment and said it was very hard to get a publisher, my heart sank, because I was here and just wondering, how is that even possible? But hey, here we are. So I'd like to just, one, thank you on behalf of this generation, that there's going to be something for us to refer to. So thank you very much, ma'am, for that. And I apologize also for, on behalf of Nigerian publishers, for doing so my question, I'm wondering, in the course of doing the research and putting this together, because I haven't read this book, I don't know anything about it other than what I've listened to this evening. I imagine that you would have had to source for material and all that from the maybe the archives, and then in addition to like speaking to people. So how receptive were the people you interviewed, or your primary source of information, and did you have to rely heavily on I don't know, National Archives and all that to be able to get your sources, or to get your information that helped in putting the book together?
Well, thank you so much for your question and your words of encouragement. I'm certainly encouraged to explore further, because I gathered so much information. Not everything I gathered is actually in the book. That is the truth. I didn't use oral sources at all. Except in chapter 19, where I was able to speak to one or two family members of the early barristers, the early women barristers, such as Dr. Anino Emo. I believe I saw her come online. She passed the comment. Her mom is one of those that is still alive, and some information from her, about her mom's life and all of that, because she's quite advanced in age. She's in her 80s now, and was the first woman barrister in the Midwest region. So I relied heavily on newspapers, colonial documents, and I got in contact with some of the institutions where some of the ladies attended. The Middle Temple Inn, for example, the law school in one of the several law schools in the United Kingdom. They obliged me by giving me some documents, the school documents of another lawyer, Darucha. Darucha's granddaughter, who was an early female barrister. I was able to get her documents as well. So the archives is where the information is, and it is so rich. I'm holding brief for them, unashamedly holding brief for the National Archives. And the archives are so rich in information. They're waiting for us to come in there and begin to dig up. So I'm making a case for them. Filmmakers, creatives of fiction, historical fiction, you can go into the archives around the country and you can get material for your work from Nigeria's National Archives. And it is so urgent because, as we said at the beginning of this session, our archives are paper-based and a lot of our history is being lost. I can testify to the fact that the newspapers are crumbling will crumble in your fingers if you do not handle it care. As a matter of fact, they don't even like giving out some of them because, truly and truly, they're in a bad state. I cannot overemphasize this. So yes, the archives serve as my my original source of history. And I have to also say the British Library also has been a source for me, a haven as well, because they have digitized a lot of our newspapers. And so one is able to, go to the British Library and read some of these newspapers dating back to 1913, 1914, and see what women were doing. And I have to say quickly here that I discovered that Nigerian women were active during World War One.
World War One?
I won't say anything more than that. So that World War One, Nigerian women were active
to get away with that.
War.
No,
so I'm not going to reveal. I'm not going to reveal any more about that because I'm planning another volume of history. So we have to wait for that to come out. Perhaps 2026 or 2027.
Okay, they're asking for a sneak peek here. Sneak peek. Just one story. They're asking for one. Okay, share so that she can hear and believe. Just one story.
I hold brief for her. She just did.
Pardon?
We were active in the first.
No, but we want one story. We want one story. They want one story.
Don't. Maybe they would encourage a Nigerian publisher to take on that text.
Story. One story. Once upon a time.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear.
Okay. The audience here say, can you share one story? One. Just one. From First World War, one story
of my one story from my recent findings
of World War One. Just one story, one small story.
Okay, so in 1915. Okay, so in 1915, Nigerian troops were in the Cameroons. Yes, I'm telling the story. In 1915, Nigerian troops were in the Cameroons fighting on behalf of the British Empire. One of the British soldiers wrote a letter to the colonial administrator and said, "Listen, our guys are on the front line. They do not have any meat. They don't have their dietary requirements." That was the beginning of the what was called the Cameroon's Meat Fund for Nigerian troops. And so money had to be raised for the Nigerian meat Cameroon. Now, Nigerian women were at the forefront of this fundraising movement. The likes of Augusta Spencer, the likes of Charlotte Obasa, I'm sure we're familiar with the name Charlotte Obasa, the likes of Ethel Gibson, Charlotte Obasa and her sisters. Yes, Dr. Obasa's wife, Charlotte Obasa and her sisters, Augusta Savage and Ethel Gibson, the likes of Mrs. Moore, Mrs. Eric Moore, Annabelle, I think her first name was Annabelle, the likes of Mrs. Ajasa, Lucretia. So there were all these concerts. They planned balls. They were active in raising funds for the Nigerian war charities and the British war charities that helped.
Okay, we are back. Okay. Okay, now.
Okay, so that is the gist of that, yes. Okay, what have we done? Okay, okay. Saved by the okay now. Okay, Dr. Ilumaka, you've had your hand up. Do you still want to say something?
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon for you all. I wanted to congratulate Tayo on the book. It's never easy to write a book, requires a lot of discipline. I'm sorry to hear you didn't find a publisher, but just for other women who...
Hello? We've lost
you hear me?
Doctor. Yes, yes. You're back now.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to say, please, even if you go to a publisher who's outside, negotiate your rights. Please don't, so that in future, you might still be able to publish a Nigerian edition. So I just wanted to remind you that as you go forward with your future books and for anyone else, it's a really important exercise you're engaging in. Very often in the universities, final year students are saying, oh, we don't know what to write our project on. There's a lot, as you have shown, and a lot that would be really interesting when they start. With the archives, I want to say that some of our archives, especially the early colonial archives, are thankfully duplicated in Ghana, just so that people don't despair, because really the state of those newspapers and other documents in the archives is abysmal. Thank God for the Ibadan archives. I also found them to be quite helpful. When I tried to access archives at the High Court, Supreme Court of Old in Lagos, now I don't know if they've been affected by the fire, they were completely uncooperative. It was all about how much you could bribe them. And in fact, they blocked my research completely. And those archives are falling apart. These are cases regarding women who filed some of the earliest cases, court cases, I mean. And I'm sure much of those archives are lost. So we do have that happening in Nigeria. We need more writing of history so that even if we do some archival material, some people would have accessed them and written these things. Thank you very much. Congratulations. I look forward to the book.
Thank you. Back to physical. Anybody? Do we have anybody? Yes, please come.
Hi, good evening or afternoon. I just wanted to commend you on your work. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, excellent. I work as an archivist and also a musicologist, and I do oral history work as well. So 2 questions. I know your primary sources were widely based on what you found in the archival records, and that you mentioned you were able to talk to some of the descendants of people mentioned in your book. But in the future, are you planning to try to track down other family members from the people featured here in your work? Sorry, I'm so sorry. Are you planning to interview family members?
Thank you for that, because you just reminded me of some of the experiences I had with trying to interview people. I have 2 experiences to share. I discovered that in my writing of the early barristers, some of them, not all of them, some of their children were so young, they were not even aware of what their moms were doing. I give an example. Olabisi Alakija, Rena, she married Kofi Awona Rena, and she did so well. She even, not only was she a member of WASU, the West African Students Union, she also followed her husband to Ghana, and she contested for the elections to the Accra Town Council, and she won. And she was a councillor in the Accra Town Council. And the reports I read about her, they refer to her as she was the youngest counselor at the time, the young Bisi Alakijarena, how they refer to her, and how progressive she was. And because she was a lawyer, she even helped some of the CPP members, Nkrumah's people who were, being tossed into jail and all of that. So she was quite resourceful. Unfortunately, her son, who is in his 70s, was so young at the time, he was not even aware that his mom did all of that. So I am the one providing that information. Now, the second instance is of somebody I approached and I said, listen, it seems your uncle is uh, is related to someone who was active with the Abeokuta Women's Union. And he said, that woman you're talking about was my grandma, but was she a member of the Abeokuta Council? Was she one of them? I said, yes. He didn't know that she was.
Yes.
I
find
that's,
it's interesting. I find some
was there with the women barristers. Again with the women barristers. I said to a politician I know in Ogun State, I said, oh, are you related to this lady? She's one of the early women barristers. And I believe that she was a politician, that she vied for elections in 1950 to the Lagos Town Council. He said no, that she was not involved in politics, that he knows that she was his father's sister, but she wasn't a politician. I said, but I have the electoral list for 1950, and her name is on that list.
Right. So sometimes
I took a picture of it and I sent it to him. So you can see why I had to rely heavily on newspapers.
I understand. Yes, I understand.
Some of the families are not even aware of what their moms did.
Exactly. Yes, I know. Maybe it might even be more beneficial to reach out to others who are directly involved in the political action and the movement, and less, family members and descendants who are too young to be there. It might be, a process of tracking down others who are involved.
Yeah.
That might be the route. And then my last question, because I know I'm taking up a lot of time, thank you, is, are you considering writing, sometimes people have a learner's companion that goes with the book for younger students, so that, right, like this version might be ideal for college students or whatever, but if you did a young reader's version, it would be easier to pass on to middle schoolers, high school age students, and like the information condensed and presented in a way that they're learning the history, they're learning the activism, they're learning the movements, and it's less than 700 pages for those of the younger ones who don't love to read as much as I do. I'll sit in the archives and read all day, but our blessed young ones, they need some help.
I take that point.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you. I take that point because it's very important that have access to children, folks, young adults, and probably the 700-page plus book will put them off. So we need, smaller versions for them. So yes, I note that, and I think that there, women historians out there, we need to do more. I have done this, and I want to do more. And this is why I had said earlier that the archives are waiting for us to come and retrieve the treasures that are there. So it's a good point, and I hope that the younger generation who are listening in will take up that point as well. But could I just say quickly on the point that you raised about speaking to contemporaries?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Speak quickly before you go, I just want to speak quickly to the point about speaking to contemporaries of some of these historical figures. Most of them have left us.
Okay.
Most of them have left us. some of them are advanced in age, and you know, I've spoken to a gentleman before trying to find out some information about somebody he interviewed. He's in his 80s, somebody he interviewed way back in the 70s. And he couldn't even remember that he conducted the interview. So I have to also be creative about the way I get this information, and say, and not not feel bad or feel guilty that I haven't used oral sources to get what it is that I want to get. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all you've done. This is an incredible resource to many people. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a online question here, but while you are sitting down, so she's curious to know the ways in which you feel the absence of women's histories, such as the ones you have written, have affected the perception of Nigeria's histories, if at all. If there are missing histories, do you think the writing of these will change anything? Did you hear me? Are we?
Yes, I do. I think that it shows a huge gap, because there is a gap in knowledge. There is a gap in knowledge, there's a gap in information. And I think that what I have brought out, fills that gap, because I myself didn't even know that there was a Nigerian Women's Party. So I am better informed. And I believe that this book will keep us informed, keep us knowledgeable about what women did. So when people from, say, the UK or Canada or the US or even here or even in Africa are saying, oh, this is what women did. Oh, so was a part of the nationalist movement. So was part of the walk to independence. We can also say, oh, by the way, we had all these women. This is what they did. I know we're only just really aware of Funaira and Sokuti and the Aba women's war. Those are the ones that have been played up over the years. But my book now says there is much more than that. There's much more we can speak about. There's so many more women we can speak about. There's so many more experiences we can speak about. The early women in the legislative institutions, for instance, I found their speeches and I have put them in the book. I didn't summarize. I deliberately didn't summarize them. I quoted verbatim so that, one, we are preserving their voice. Two, we know what women said back in the 50s, back in the 60s. So yes, I think that my book will have an impact on history as it is today. And it also goes to show that we do not have to have history through a male perspective or history through a Western perspective. There's so much talk about, how Africans should tell their stories. This is what I have done, so that it is from our perspective. It is not from the perspective of the West, or it is not through the eyes of a male historian writer who may just decide that, let me just write this in passing. No, we've done so much. Women have done so much to be treated as micro narratives or just in passing. And this book is supposed to be that jump-off point. I have not included everything, like I said, but it's a jump-off point for other women to now say, let me take a chapter from this book and expand it.
Good afternoon, madam. Good afternoon, madam.
And this is the last question.
My name is Bisala Seni, and I just want to commend you for the work you've done. I thank you so much for obviously going into this much work and effort to actually get this book. And like everyone else, I was really looking forward to reading a copy of this book, or at least getting a copy of this book today. So I'm a content producer for Kiddies Entertainment. So I do history in animation form for little kids. So things like state and capital, history of Nigeria, but in animation form. So I've got 13 episodes that I've shown locally in Nigeria, obviously, and trying to get it to Nigerians in diaspora. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. So I thought getting this book and obviously probably getting ideas and things I can actually translate, like the previous person just said, for the younger generation to digest in little bits, obviously. So I was wondering, since you had issues publishing it locally, have you thought of doing maybe self-publishing on Amazon or some online version so that we can obviously get our hands on this book as soon as possible? Or how can we, like today, like tonight or tomorrow, how can we start reading? Because it's 7 pages, so I'm thinking 700 pages of good. So I'm thinking maybe a page a day, 2 pages a day, we'll get it over here. But so I was hoping, is there a way we can get it online, maybe through Amazon or someone else, like can self-publish? And that would be maybe a step, and then maybe a demand for that would obviously put pressure in having a Nigerian publisher that will obviously come up and see obviously the value we already see. I mean, I only found out about this earlier, was like 2 a.m. this morning when I was going through my page, and I quickly sent a message and said, please reserve a seat and one for my sister as well. I'm coming anyway. That's thank you so much for this, and God bless you immensely for your efforts and trying to pass that history and that empowerment to the other, to our generation and obviously the ones coming after. Thank you so much, madam. So have you ever talked about online publishing, or what's the next step in trying to obviously get it out there?
Well, it's available online. I believe that Barrister Aduke has put the link online, because it's only available in the UK at the moment, actually, because the publisher is here. So you know that you can access the internet from anywhere in the world. So you can order it from Nigeria. But we are exploring. I believe there are 1 or 2 Nigerian publishers in Nigeria are interested in getting a version out in the country. So that may then help a lot of us who are out there. So that door is wide open, actually, and look forward to receiving requests, through my publisher here for getting a version out in Nigeria. Otherwise, the alternative is to order it online.
Okay, thank you so much, madam. Thank you. And sorry, I forgot to mention the animation I'm doing is called Proudly Nigerian After School Club. So it's 13 episodes of animation teaching history, values, and stuff. So I would maybe reach out to you. Maybe we can work on trying to get the book to.
Please do. Yes,
thank you very much.
Please do.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Please do. Thank you, and well done with your vision.
All right. Thank you very much.
She can't hear you.
Well done with your vision. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, we have, and Moara is going to be the last person because we're going to round up. If there's anybody online, but if not, this is going to be the last comment, and then we'll round up. Moara, yes. Good evening, and thank you for all you have done, giving us this book. I just wanted to say very quickly that following on from the last speaker, this raises, and this is really for everyone, really. I'm sure the author is already aware of this. This raises the question of rights. Anyone wants to do animation, whatever, it has to be properly optioned and rights obtained in order to do that, so that the author's copyright is, and her work and all the years and legwork and creative means of doing research that she's put into this, that all of that is protected. So it's important that everyone is aware that rights have to be properly obtained. Can I also share my insight in terms of interviewing people? Because I think there was some discussion earlier about trying to interview maybe the offspring of some of the people in this book. As an author, as a writer myself, I don't write history, but I find that in Nigeria, but I'm very interested in stories of the past, so I try to interview people in all sorts of situations. I find that people are actually quite resistant. It would be good to get your own insight on this. I find that people are quite resistant, even when it's something very innocuous, something small, something pleasant. People are always suspicious, like, why do you want to know? And this is really a problem for authors, creative writers in Nigeria, not to even talk of historians. So please, if you can perhaps talk a bit about that, because that's been my own experience. People are very, very suspicious. They will suddenly not pick the phone, even when it's a past event that maybe you were part of and they were part of it as well. The moment you say, "Can we talk about this?" and your recollections, they shut down. In 90% of the cases, this has been my own experience. So over to you, please, if you can speak to that, perhaps.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for that. I'd actually, please stay seated. Can she please stay seated? Yes, please stay. I'd actually shared a bit of that with one of the ladies who had earlier come, and I said my experience is that some of in chapter 19, where I wrote about the early women barristers, a lot of their children were not even aware of what their moms did. Their moms did. They knew that their moms were barristers, but other activities that their moms were engaged in, they didn't know. I was the one who said, "Oh, do you know your mom was a politician, or do you know your aunt was a politician?" They would say, "No, she wasn't." They would even be arguing with me, saying, "No, that wasn't what happened." And I'll say, "Look, but this is her name on the electoral list. This is what the newspaper has said." So that has been I also found a lot of resistance, in terms of giving me photographs. Not everyone was pleased. I explained that, I have a publisher in the UK trying to impress them that I'm not just one local little woman trying to get your relatives photograph, but it didn't work. So I align with what you're saying, that Nigerians clam up sometimes. They don't want to release their suspicions, and that is why I think that for you're a creative writer. I think that the archives can also help you to inspire and fire up your imagination about what it is that you want to write. So I'm a firm believer in those archives. They have treasures and riches and gems that are still waiting for us to discover and dig up. So that's my response to that.
Thank you very much. I would add that because we come from an oral tradition, and definitely as a fiction writer myself, yes, I love archives, but I think that there's something to be said also for just the recollections of people when one is able to get them. So we'll keep trying. Thank you so much. Thank you, Malala. Yeah. And we've almost come to the end, so I'd like to thank you, Tayo. Tayo and I met online on Twitter. So this is actually the first full-length conversation that we're actually having. So social media, yeah, there's some good in it. I had seen her tweets over the last, I guess, post-COVID, when you started to bring out the little snippets. I followed her, she followed me. And when I saw she was bringing out this book in October, I reached out to her and I said, look, reserve time in your schedule. We must do a talk in Women's History Month. So thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you to Lawan, our host. See you. So for those of you online who don't know him, this is Lawan Adams, who's the chairman of Loving Lagos and our physical host. So thank you to him. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to everybody online who has stayed. Thank you, everybody physical who has stayed. Is there a way that she can see how many people there are? Should I turn it around? I don't want to lose it. Okay. Wait.
Thank you all. Thank you all for investing time in coming. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Tayo. Your new book that you're working on, when is it coming out? Tell us.
Oh, that would be, well, as my strength allows, perhaps 2026. Okay. As my strength allows, because it's a lot of work, it's very tedious, and I struggle along. It's a labor of love, as you know. So
yes.
But I've got a lot of interest. There are two publishers that want to work with me, one in Canada, one here in the UK. So maybe that would then energize me to move faster.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tayo, and to everybody here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone who joined online and physical. Thank you for your interest in my work. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Wait, get all the comments.
Thank you to everybody.
See you, Tayo. Talk to you soon.
Yes. Give my regards to the guys. I'm grateful, the technical guys.
I will. Okay, Rashid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Okay, so you, huh? Okay, yes, hold on, quickly, quick, before everybody goes. No, but we can ask her to come back.
No.
Why didn't you say when you were here?
I just
okay, say it that will be on.
Okay, well, it's really to talk to everybody about, and I mean, the reason why I came up was.
Look at.
Okay. Sorry. So the reason I came up, I mean, when you talked about, the difficulty getting information out of people, for us, the men folk, we thought it would be easier with the women folk. So it's interesting to find out that you experience the same thing. And more so for what we do here. So we celebrate this, we go out to people to say, come and share your story and own it. But it's clearly not what people are used to hear. So I guess it's going to take a while and they need to see it work first because you find that for us, the primary objective is to save their buildings because that's the root story of this building. Is we literally saved it by buying it and keeping it in this fashion. So,
because the one next door is the building site now.
And it was a beautiful building, listed building, but they knocked it down. The idea was to buy this, to knock both down and build modern residential. And for that reason, and that has happened in Lagos, and I'm sure that like every other part of the world. And really, for us, the project is to see how many we can see. Clearly, there's so much we can do as individuals, but there's a lot more we can do, collectively in doing that. And not just even funding, is to come up with ideas to the owners to say, look, you could use it for Airbnb, you could use it for things like this, you could use it for anything, and then understanding the peculiar situations that go in there. One of the issues is that it's usually like a family, and some members would want to sell, some would not. It just goes on like that. So once you appreciate that, you can now begin to dig into what the options are for them to save that building or whatever use they can put to it. So for us, this story sounds very similar to what we're going to hear as well. And I think that there's a lot to share and learn. And why I came up here is just to let everybody know we're all going through the same. We must find a way to make it work, to make our voices heard, save these buildings, collect all those materials that are needed. However we're going to do it, share the experiences. I'm sure, just that collaboration will yield results. Thank you.
Okay, and on that note, everybody online, bye from us at Loving Lagos. Thank you. Rashid, do you want to?
If I would think I'd like to introduce somebody that I just met.